Page 388 of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi. If you'd like to sponsor upcoming share more of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi, please contact me directly. It would be very greatly appreciated. Today we're doing Siman Reish Samach Vav Sif Ches through Siman Reish Samach Vav Sif Ches Vav. Ches, sorry, yes, Ches, V'zoshan Rambam. Minyaki Solek Shima Leches. You put the wallet on the donkey when it's ready walking. Shatir Tzelah mode when you want it to stop. Note you take the wallet from on the top of the donkey. In order that it should not stand still with the wallet on top of it. In order that it should not be any akira, uprooting, or hanacha, placement with on top of the donkey. You cannot direct it, conduct it, even with your voice, as long as the wallet is upon it, in order not to be driving a donkey on Shabbos. End quote for the Rambam. Bosif Shnei Dvarim, the Rambam adds two things. First, before it stands still, you should move the wallet from it. Also, says that you can't drive it. I feel even with your voice. Even if it's not doing through your direction and your kiranocha, it's just walking. Rash argues, really holds a given kiranocha, says there's no uprooting replacement. And there's no issue in driving it. I feel conducting it. Rabbeinu Beis Yosef Hachti Beis Yosef Hachti Do Kodem Amida Lois Keklau. But Beis Yosef is not mentioned. You have to take the wallet off the back before it stands still. And that which you should not supposed to conduct it even with your voice. Wrote the name of the Yeshomrim, Mishum the Dato, because his opinion is the Ikar Dina, the primary halacha is Kararashka, that's permitted. Ram seems to be astonishing. Where does he get his halacha from? Mishabur writes that if it is walking on account of his voice, there is an Isser Mechamer, which obviously would be going like the Rambam and not like the Rashba. Test. He strictly told me that which the Rambam required you to take the wallet from the animal's back before it stands still. I believe it seems that way from the Sugas Hashas. Shomer Shom, it says when it is already moving, you put the wallet on it, and when it stands, you move it from it. That's the case, why can't you do it even with your friend? Forget about an animal. Because it's difficult, says Arukh HaShulchan. If you're going to say literally when it stands still, that's to remove the wallet. How can you ask that should be permitted by a friend as well? The first Mishnah, Masechah Shabbos, Pasha Tani, when the poor person extends his hand into the house, the kulei, the other buys mitocha, and the Balabais takes something out of the hand, Shnei Baturim, they're both exempt. First Bagmarsham, the Pata also that it's it is Pata, they're both exempt, but still also to do so midarabana. So nakir below hanacha, because uprooting without placement, or hanacha below kir, or placement without uprooting, also midarabana. They're both also midarabana. The momentus mamish hanacha. So the animal is literally standing. That the hanacha is done that way. And with how can you say that with your friend, you do that deliberately? It's doing hanacha without a kira, which is the rabbanon, right? So it must be that when it stands, you take it from it. It means before it stands, you take it from it. Maybe you ask, how you know the donkey intends to stand still? I could say the okay, this is not the type of thing we know nowadays, but it says an animal which is carrying a burden does not stand all of a sudden. It prepares itself to stand. It can be called, it'll slow down until it comes to a standstill. Therefore, when you see that it wants to slow down and stand still, take the wild from it before it comes to a complete halt. Yud. So it says there's another, but the Rambam has a different opinion than it first seems. You find two prohibitions with an animal on Shabbos. Shvi says behemto, the animal has to desist from doing labor. The nafkalam milamanya ruach shor chavachamarecha. From the pasuk which says that your ox and your donkey should rest. The section notices masongam below bailam, and that is a problem, even if it's carrying a burden without any involvement of the owner. The entire parak by Behema on Shabbos is founded on this, like the problem is deals with this problem of animals bearing burdens on Shabbos. Pashanis, the second is a separate prohibition, mechamer, which is driving the donkey. Klamar, meaning the mechamer charbem to. He's conducting the animal. The nafkla mibi lo tasekom achata techa, which you know for don't do any work, you and your animal. Separate pasuk. Today's the malacha shi'adei name. What's the malacha which is done by both the person and the animal together? Zumachamer. This is conducting the animal, driving it. Shituhuna bumachamer. It bears the burden and you drive it. Vena move on tarte lama. So says I understand why I need two prohibitions. Ubishlam shvisas behemto tzarich mechamer. I understand that for shvisas behemto, for the animal descendants of labor, you need mechamer. Mishum the shvisas behemto ain't el behemot shalom. Because shvisas behema means your animal should desist from labor. I'm a mechamer, but the drive is a prohibition. Who got me behema sakum, even by an animal which belongs to a non-Jew, much because of Iran Ein Sham. Why do we have hemta? Why do we have to have a separate prohibition of animals desisting from labor? It's enough we know you're not allowed to drive an animal. What more do you need than that? But so it must be that shvisas behemto is already is a problem with akira and hanocha. In other words, there is no problem with shvisas behemto unless you have uprooting and placement. But mechamer is already a problem driving the animal, even just when it has burden on it. I feel it says sakir banocha. Even there is no uprooting and placement. Mechamer is also an issue mechamer. Different Rambam also. Again, they're two separate things. Shitas Behem requires akira v'anocha, whereas mechamer is even without akira hanocha. Therefore, Huchlach Lomar Ba'osur Lo. That's what I'm about to say. Ba'osur and you're not allowed to conduct the Chulei. And because it's a separate prohibition, independent of Akira Hanocha. That's a Rashi Batur say it's all the same thing. It's Lomar. We have to say the Achibur, just what it means to say that. Torah Osa Ben Shebehem Levada Tuna Matsui. The Torah forbade whether the animal itself carries a burden, he shall low. When it's hers, and when he's actually driving it, I feel enershlo, even if it's not yours. If I would just say don't drive it, it's that you have to have both components, both that it's your animal and that it has and that it is it has to be both bearing a burden and it has to be your animal. Both. Okay? Odom Shalom say the Rambam, this is the brackets. The Rambam Spirle. Rambam holds the Gam Mechamer Eno Elabehim Shalo. Mechamer really is also only in your animal, your own animal. Okay, Mechamer Ryuto Gamre. So Mechamer is completely extra. Abai de Mechamer Akira Hanocha. So that could be. So must be mechamer comes to teach us that even with arakir and hanocha there is mechamer, just by driving, by conducting the animal in and of itself. So according to the Rashba, there's no such thing as mechamer unless it's akir and hanocha. According to the Rambam, even without akir and hanocha. I'm not sure I got this right before it says when we say for that Rashba tu nisach lamadach busha tor asa ben shabem belhada tu masui shlo ben shu mechamer chaya afil ena shalo. I think Shneim means that you need Akira and Hanocha and Behema Shalom. In other words, according to Rashba, the word is said Mechamer B'chud, that it's only if you have Akira and Hanocha and it's also your animal. Mechamer comes and tells us that it's not just if it's your animal, it's even if it's somebody else animal, you're still Chai because it might not be Shus, but Mechamer it actually is. Be that as it may, says the Arukh HaShulchan Yalef. Translation is Imagola, by us when we travel wagons. Imaglon Yehudi, if the wagon driver is not a Jew. You're not far from a city. Rosh Hashem is Shakan, you see the sun is about to set. You read me al agola. You go down from the wagon. You see me al agola, and put your objects and your money inside the wagon. Correctly and walk. But going so we have a glove, and the wagon driver will drive to his house, and you walk. As long as after dark falls, you'll be within the 2,000 amos of the city. So you don't have to walk more than 2,000 amos after dark. You must first off the wagon is his, or Aglona Yehudi, or the wagon driver is a Jew. Okay, how can the horse then go with a saddle and linked to the wagon? Misha Tershach, after it gets dark, over al Shvisas Behemto, you transgress the Shvisas Behemto, causing not allowing your animal to desist from labor. You definitely have to scout out previously. We're supposed to base a Mokum Mikom come to a complete halt before sunset. I'm not mean loss, okay. But if you didn't do this, we should be there and you can't remain on the road. Maybe it's a Pekuach Nefesh, Sakana. Near Shafkirasus. It seems that Arukh HaShulchan says that you have to make the horse hefker. Yaniach golamos of chapatzav, and put your money and your objects on the horse, which is now no longer yours, nor no longer the wagon driver's. Nicholech natzmo, and let it go on its own. It's going to go on its own to enter the city. Vivakesh any Yehudi and Shaskin non-Jew, she told him most to take the money and the objects miyagolah from the wagon. Yachniseh buys them into the house. The gam is a susiatiri masaro. Also, the horse should be released from its imprisonment on the wagon, connected to the wagon. That you might even be able to yourself. Because there's no malacha involved. Some people are traveling by railroad. Suppose someone comes near nightfall, but simply has to come into the nearby city to the station where they can get off. On the train, hire a non-Jew to carry your stuff within the city to your house or to your place where you're going to stay. You should walk from the station. Not carry anything. Not in his hands and not in his pockets. In the same more as shows, if you have a clock, Ganking so any Yudi Mokum Shos Tatal is supposed to be non-Jew place you're not allowed to carry. Back then, clocks were not watches. Today, with a watch, I don't know what he'd say with a malbush, which obviously is a big issue. But in any event, he's tell you about a clock then, which was not a malbush. A clock, Chacham Ena Barosho. The best thing is to plan ahead. But not to put yourself in such a situation. Mr. Boer writes that when you're being mafking your animal, you should be in front of three, or at least in front of one other person. When there's nobody else, then you mafk it to yourself. So too, if you have heavy burden and you can't give it to a non-Jew, you can mafkir it or give it to a non-Jew with a sale, and then it'll actually be allowed to the animal to, so to speak, carry it home. Yud base. Kasser Rabbeinu Ha'amah, but see base. Hu lo yekova chamor elech braglav. You should not ride on a donkey, but rather you should go by foot. He has to go outside of the tchum where he is, outside of his currently 2,000 amos. At least he was because he was afraid of bandits or some other type of danger. I feel he's within the tchum, but he's afraid. He can sit on the donkey and ride. And for the Ramah, it says, bear Varim. Means to say, the name Mishu, but there are somebody who's on the road, and it became Shabbos, and he's got to go outside the Tchum. He has no place to rest where he is. Yeshimo Chamor, he has a donkey or a horse. Yeshishimor, those who say, it's better to ride than walk outside the Tchum where you are. Because when you ride, your legs are higher than 10 tefachim off the ground. And there's no Tchum above 10 tefachim from the ground. As opposed to when you walk. What about the fact that your animal is not resisting from labor? The person who's live riding on the back of the animal is considered to be holding up himself to the extent that the animal is not truly completely giving him the ride. So therefore, it's not complete. It's not really shvisas bamto. What about the saddle? The saddle is negated to the rider, like the wheelchair to the person who's riding the wheelchair, etc. But if you walk on it by leg, by your own leg, you have to stay serious. There'll be two problems. First, you're going to go outside the tchum. If you have and you're going to transgress the streets of Svamto, means hey, she knows it's okay because it's carrying the saddle, which is not busted to you if you're not riding the horse. Yeshua writes that even according to the Svara, that equally this Svara, it's only when you're riding it. If the animal's drawing a wagon, even if the wagon is more than 10 tefachim off the ground, it's best that you should walk when to sit in the wagon because obviously a horse is considered kind of like a hefsek, putting yourself in the ground, but a wagon evidently is not. You gimel. Rabbeinu Ramacholek was a Rama argues. So he holds ad Rama. Yech bragov loyerko. You should walk and not ride. Dinei gam b'rechiva yeshfus. By riding, there's also the rabbinic prohibition. The mishtam shalachan because using an animal. My abich was this. So what do you gain by sitting on the animal? Even if you end up going more than 12 meal because of the danger. And according to the Rama, the rice, in which case, according to Rama comes to the rice. Nevertheless, he says, you know what? Truth is, even riding, prohibition of tchum, the roch of kamahach because riding is like walking. So it's fachim. I mean, and just like when you travel in a wagon, which is more than 10 fachim high above the ground, nevertheless, there is a prohibition of tchum. The karas michtahu, it's as if you're walking on the ground. The semen tough dalid. I'm going to learn much later on. Who are dynamic so too when you're riding. El yech bragos, therefore you should walk. V'im okabach there's a saddle on the animal. Shechem elav, toss it off the animal. Okay, we don't allow you because you're going to lose the saddle. To transgress shvitas behema. Uvata beside this, lopsika milsa, the ain't chumim l'malam. It's not clear that this concept that there's no chum above 10 tvachim. Because shasam lusham and tavdalit. Amnamzel hakol shein sakona b'chassid. So if there's no danger in walking. Shabbos just you can remain there all Shabbos. If there is a danger in walking, because bandits might come across you, won't have a way of escaping. Or some kind of a different danger. So you have to go as speedily as possible. It's best to ride on the animal. To go as quickly as possible. I feel even within 2,000 amos. The Raglav ain't Isra Klal, where if he would walk, there'd be no prohibition at all. Nothing stands in the way of Pikuach Nefesh. We just explained what you should do when you're traveling in a wagon. But now we're going to add something. If the wagon itself without the wheels, is 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim wide, it is a Rishus Yachid, but Rishus Rabbi can't carry from within it to Rishus Rabbi. After sitting in the wagon, it became dark. You don't go down from the wagon with your money, with your objects, even though in your garments, because you're going to Rishus Rabbi, and you put your objects inside the wagon. While you're sitting there. Then you go down from the wagon. But if the wagon itself is not that fucking high, we don't join the wheels to it to measure. Because it's a wall through which goats can break through. And if the front of the wheels are 3 tefachim down to the ground. And the wagon is then a mokum tur after chava arba, even though it's more than 4 tefachim wide. Mishum ain't karmelis b'kelim, because no concept of karmelis by vessels. In other words, even though it's more than 4 tefachim and less than 10 tefachim is normally a karmelis, not here, because no such thing as a karmelis by vessel. And therefore you can go down from the wagon with your objects. What he means to say, I think, is that where the wagon wheels lift the wagon more than 3 tefachim off the ground, the fact that the wagon wheels go down to the ground doesn't do you no good, and therefore it's either a karmelis or a makom tur, and therefore you can go, therefore you can go down from the wagon, because as a conclusion, ain't karmelis b'kalim. You go down from the wagon to Rishus Rabim, it's not a problem. Maybe Rishus Yachid, if there is no gap of 3 tefachim between the wagon proper, underneath it, and the ground itself. But he says, feeling the done the karmelis, even if the clothes that the wagon is a karmelis. Nevertheless, would be done. The lace of Rishus Rabim for us, we don't have a true Rishus Rabim for the most part. The karmelis is only karmelis. Mutar doesn't have karmelis, and go from the karmelis, which is the wagon, to the karmelis, which is the ground. Yeah, go if the wagon and the horse belong to him or to Yisrael or another Yisrael, and to go to have to shom. They have to be mafkid, of course, for the problem of shvitzas behemta. Back as he says, Magaram shom kasav the aim is the shvitzas behemta tzarachim. Magaram says no problem shvitzas behemta, and Arukh HaShulchan says I don't understand why not. But the gam the okef beha, also the saddle and the vadua, whatever that dua is, I guess some sort of accoutrement of the horse, are love. The pshita shesh v'zeh dua beheba shesh behemta v'duk, and there is obviously shvitzas behemta involved as a problem. Tesvav hayemo chamor v'cheresh v'shoita v'kata. If you had a donkey and also a person not chayav in mitzvos, by deaf mute, imbecile, or a child, you should put it on the animal. You should not put it on one of these human beings. They mean all of them. They're human beings just like you. And therefore you might come to make a mistake and extrapolate. If you give it to them, give it also to an adult who is in full control of his faculties. If all you had with you was a deaf mute or a person who's not in possession of his faculties, then it's try to give it to a person not in possession of his faculties. Being ashamed of das is there's no intellect whatsoever. But a person deaf mute, he has a weak das, and therefore shouldn't give it to him. If you have a person not in possession of his faculties and a minor, then it's try to give it to a person not in possession of his faculties. Because the cotton will eventually reach the point of being in possession of his faculties. If you have a person who's deaf youth and a child, and then give it to either one of them, whoever one you want to shove in him, they are equal. The deaf youth has a light form of das, and he's never going to come to complete das. The cotton has no das whatsoever. The cloud das tomorrow, but someday he will come to have complete das. The halacha writes in Pri Megadim that this is only talking about where he's not your son. But if he's your son, who's a ben chinuch midrabanan, you should give it to the cheresh or the shoita. He's not sure that perhaps even if the cheresh or shoita is his son, you should still give it to them because they're as opposed to your son who's a katan, because they are not in the parameter of chinuch, as opposed to your son who has full possession of his faculties is. Therefore, best give it to your children who are not fully obligated in chinuch and whom you're not fully obligated in chinuch, than to retain it on the son who is fully obligated on account of chinuch.